Now, you go to another agency when you shift out of WME?
So I went over to a management company, which is very similar to an agency.
It's all the same stuff. They just represent people.
Correct. The difference of a manager and an agent, I guess, a manager is allowed to produce TV and film. So I went and I worked for a great boss. His name was Geyer Kaczynski, and Geyer's still managing today, and he has phenomenal clients. I mean, he signed Angelina Jolie when she was, I want to say, 17 years old. So he's represented her whole life. Billy Bob Thornton. He's worked with a lot. Nicole Kidman is his client now. So he has a lot of big clients. And yeah, so when I was working with him, and then I got promoted. That was my promotion on his desk. So after I worked for him, I got promoted to a manager, and then started signing clients. I was on teams, so I worked on the Angelina team, the Billy Bob team, but I also started signing my own clients. And I guess the big one was Chuck Liddell. So I signed Chuck Liddell.
Damn, that's early UFC days too.
This was in 2004, and it was kind of a fluke, to be honest with you. So I had known what the UFC was, but I never watched. I never watched any of the maybe the early ones, or just caught a glimpse of it. But it was
totally barbaric back then too. It was way different.
It really was, and so this is how things work, right? One introduction leads to something, which leads to something. So I was working with a client. Her name was Willa Ford. She's a pop singer. And I got her a gig. She was the host of the first season of the Ultimate Fighter reality show. No, I don't even think people remember this. First season, it was Chuck versus Randy Couture. They were both the coaches. And this was this brand new reality show. And that's the catalyst really that kind of blew up the UFC. It became really, really popular after that. And the fight for Ultimate Fighter 1 was Stefan Bonner versus Forrest Griffin. It was an amazing fight that went back and forth. And then the coaches end up fighting. It was UFC 52. So Willa goes on the show, shoots the whole thing. And then I think it was like a week into the show, she was already dating Chuck. So that's the first time I met Chuck. And it's a funny story. And Chuck came to my office. And it was right off of 9200 Sunset in West Hollywood, great building. And Chuck comes in, and I'd never heard of him. I'd never heard of Chuck before. We went and grabbed lunch, and we're walking down the street, and everyone is just, Iceman, this and that. And I turned to him, I go, how do people know who you are? Like, I was like such a dick, right? But Chuck is just such a superhuman being, and would just, he'd laugh it off. He just thought it was so funny. We got along so well. I ended up managing Chuck for 10 years. So it was a great run. He did a lot of firsts, put him on Entourage, put him on Dance.
I remember that scene.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
How'd you get that done?
So good buddy of mine, Rob Weiss, he was an executive producer and one of the main writers on Entourage. Doug Ellen was the creator of the show, and Doug and Rob had grown up. And Rob is, the most amazing human. He is Entourage. The way he talks, the way he lives his life. I mean, the dude is the coolest dude I've ever met in my life. And Rob, he was a boxer. You'd always, go to Wild Card Gym and box in LA, and was into MMA and the UFC. But this was so early on. No one really, unless you were a hardcore fan, you didn't know UFC. So I harassed Rob for a year. And finally, out of the blue, Rob called me. He said, yo, Brad, and he has that whole New York, drama accent, and said, Brad, I wrote it. And he sent me the script, and he had wrote the whole episode on his BlackBerry. I don't even think there was iPhones yet, or maybe there was like the first gen, but everyone still had the BlackBerry. And he wrote the whole episode at the Standard Hotel pool sent it to me, and I'm like, this is unbelievable. And that was it. So, a few months later, we're shooting Entourage, and it was an amazing experience. But so this is a funny story. So Chuck, I end up working with Chuck, and the first fight I ever go to is UFC 52, and it's the main event. Chuck versus Randy Couture. Chuck had lost to Randy for the title, I think, a year or two earlier. So Chuck had never been champion. Title fight, light heavyweight championship, and Chuck ends up knocking out Randy Couture, winning the title. And we're walking out of the arena. This is my first fight ever.
Where was the fight?
It was either at MGM or Mandalay Bay. It was in Vegas, but it was one of the two. It would flip flop back and forth. I honestly don't remember. It was just, it was at one of the hotels. But we walked out, and Chuck goes, just, hey, hold on to my belt for me. So I had the belt on my shoulder walking out. And it was just, now looking back, at the time I was just like, whatever, what is it? Now it's like, wow, like, this is so crazy.
Present